Behold, the King upon his throne. Long live the King. So in the 1960s, there was a problem. Okay, there were a lot of problems in the 1960s. But this particular problem that pertains to this beautiful Martin guitar here is Brazilian rosewood. See, Martin had been using Brazilian rosewood for decades. Brazil had passed an embargo on rosewood, and there was a lot of geopolitical stuff going on with that, and the rosewood supply just kind of dried up. Now, important to point out that most of the rosewood went to furniture manufacturers. Brazilian rosewood was and is a beautiful wood. But also there were some quality issues with some of the rosewood. Martin had a number of pieces of rosewood. You figure you have a PCA big, you book match it to get a back. Well, some of them, there might have been some impurities in that wood. So what are we going to do? Brazilian rosewood's difficult to get. You have all this rosewood here that has impurities that you can't use in a D28 or the D48s or the more expensive guitars. Somebody at Martin, the name Bob Johnson is thrown around, but there really isn't any kind of definitive proof about who came up with the idea, at least none that I could find. Came up with the idea of saying, hey, why don't we do a 3-piece back? And so an impurity that might be on the wood, you know, like say this middle piece, it might be on the wood here, you can cut it right out and use that middle piece, and you can use a lot of the rosewood that wasn't able to be used before. And they said, well, if we're going to do that, well, we might as well just make a new model. And you know what, we'll if you're going to make a new model, why not make it one that's more expensive? You know what I mean? We put the binding on the fretboard. They decided to voice it differently. So there was a number of prototypes, I think 6 prototypes, but there were a number of prototypes where they used different types of bracing, and what they decided to do was more of a triple O, double O type bracing. The top here, they landed on a 1/4-inch bracing, which makes it a lot more resonant. So there's a lot less rigidity to this top, and it was a very different sounding guitar. And so they slapped the name 35, because it was between the 28 and the 41s and the 48s, and they upcharged it $50 at the time. Went from the D28s were $375, I think in 1965. This was all happening in 1965, by the way. I think they were like $375. Oh my, I wish I could buy one for $375. This was a little bit more than $375 at the time, and the D35s went up to $425. And so you had a little bit more premium of a guitar that was made with wood that was scrap that you kind of couldn't use for the other guitars, and a classic was born. If you want to say, did any famous people play the D35? Well, I don't know. I mean, would you consider Elvis famous? I don't know. Would you consider Johnny Cash famous guitar player? What about Jim Croce? Would you consider him famous? I don't know. But when you talk about the sound of 60s folk music and also bluegrass music, this kind of stole the show. And this was one of Martin's best-selling guitars from that point forward, and it has fluctuated a little bit over the years. This is just such a beauty. I love her. Now, the ones today, this is a 2022 Martin D35. So this is a brand new one. This is not a vintage. Also came with Grover tuners, which it did from day one. Now, this particular D35 does not have electronic. Now, why did I not get one with electronics? This is a studio guitar. This is going to be used in a studio guitar. I'm not going to plug it in. I have a Takamine that I use live, that I love. I also have a Taylor that I can use out if I need to. I also use that a lot in the studio as well. But I bought this guitar because I needed something that was a strummer that fit my voice. I want to have something that has that bottom end. Especially for a power tenor vocalist like I am, I sometimes lack that low mid. This has it in spades. Now, it's great and it fits my voice just right, but it may not fit everybody's voice. So you really have to play one of these and try it out and see if it works for your voice. Playability. It's a big boy. And so, is this the easiest guitar to approach? It is not. That being said, the neck profile is pretty average. It's a pretty average C-shaped neck profile. Familiar with like a Fender Stratocaster? This is a little bit bigger. It's a little bit bigger, but maybe a similar shape, very much a C-shaped neck. It feels really good. It feels really good to me, because this is not Brazilian rosewood. This is East Indian rosewood, because later on in 1970, I believe, is the cutoff. Although it's a little like gray, like there were some 69s that could have been East Indian. It's a little gray there. We got ebony fretboard, which you got just a rosewood veneer here on the headstock. You got an ebony bridge, conventional bridge pins, bone nut and saddle. Oh, this guitar is a dream guitar. I have always wanted a D35, and last summer I had the opportunity to buy one, and I did. And so thank you to David at Russo Music. Those guys are awesome. If you're in Philly, check them out. I have loved every minute with it since. But I will say, big body, lots of resonance and low end. This is a beefy boy. And it may not fit what you're trying to do with an acoustic guitar. So my recommendations would be power tenors, power altos, power mezzo-soprano singers. If you have a loud, powerful voice and you're in those registers, this guitar would be a great fit for your voice. But then again, you also have to kind of reach around this dreadnought body. But it's really not that bad. I'm not a tall guy, but I'm a bigger guy, and I handle it fine. I don't have the largest hands, but this neck fits me really good. And so I think maybe some smaller players may want to go with a triple O, like a triple O 28, and that's fine. At this level of guitar, it's tough to go wrong. These are retailing for $3,200 at the time of recording here in February of 2023, which, adjusted for inflation, is actually very consistent with the pricing. It's actually a little bit less than the pricing in the 60s, which is crazy. They're worth every penny. You want something that has a little bit of beef to it, this is the guitar for you. It's resonant, it's loud, it's big. I will say that in a dense mix, this is not the go-to guitar. And I have other acoustic guitars for that. But if you have a bluegrass mix with banjos and mandolins and violins, and maybe you don't have a bass, or you got a really deep double bass, this will slot in and kind of fill that low mid frequency. And so that, in that case, you could use that. But I think where this shines is solo acoustic. I also think individual notes with this, like little pentatonic run, actually sound really good. And you wouldn't think of a dreadnought to do that kind of stuff. In that case, you could use that in a broader mixed context. But generally, this is going to fit more with a solo acoustic or pretty stripped back situation. And in that case, it fills that low end and leaves space for the vocals. It's just a pillow to set your vocals on. It really, like I said, for the right singer, it really is great. But go to your local dealer, try one out, see how it fits your voice. Check it out. Because if you buy one, you're owning an icon. You're owning a piece of history. And you will not regret it.